Good afternoon and welcome to today's Graduate Mentor webinar. Delighted to have you along today for the next hour to hear from our speaker, who's going to be talking about developing a global mindset or intercultural competence. So we will get to Sally very, very shortly. I will just give you a quick introduction for those that are new to our webinars. We've been running these every month now for the last 2 years. And the idea is to give you mentees some extra information, guidance, advice to help you make that transition into the workplace. So this is going to be really useful for anyone who's about to start with a global company. So my name's Dan Hawes and I created Graduate Mentor back in August 2020. The idea is to give free one-to-one mentoring with a mission to help the next generation of university students and graduates reach their career potential with the expert support from inspiring mentors. I'm also the co-founder of GRB, that's a recruitment consultancy for university students, recent graduates, alumni and recruiters. We have 75 staff based in Brighton on the south coast, and we've worked with over 2,000 clients such as Amazon, IBM, Unilever and Ocado, and also many fast-growing SMEs, managing to place over 8,000 graduates into their first full-time graduate or executive level jobs. So a bit of information about our mentees. So since we launched over 2 years ago, we've now had a community of over 4,000 university students and graduates go through the programme. So they represent the full spectrum of backgrounds, universities and course disciplines, with a high representation of students and graduates from diverse, disadvantaged and underrepresented groups. They're the particular audience we're trying to help get on the career ladder. So we have a huge amount of students and graduates from those marginalised groups that we're trying to help. To give you an idea, this shows you some of the universities that they are from, so all over the UK, and a broad range of subjects. So nice to see a nice spread of students and graduates who are using the platform to connect with mentors and have these sessions and help them along their career journey. Now, in our journey, we've hit various milestones. So we've had over 4,000 students and graduates registered for the service and have had sessions successfully completed. We've also managed to recruit over 300 mentors. These are from organisations such as Facebook, Google, Coca-Cola, British Army, University of Nottingham, to name but a few, but also mentors from other organisations that you may not have heard of. But they are all from a variety of different sectors. So there will be certainly someone there to help you depending on what sector you're looking to get into. This is our 13th workshop. We've had 12 so far. All of them are recorded, so you can listen back to what our mentors and experts and professionals have talked about in our previous workshops. So they're all on the platform to listen back to on demand. We have a huge social following, over 2,500 followers, and we're reaching 53,000 new users every month. We've got a variety of different success stories from mentees who've gone through the program, had far better outcomes with their interviews perhaps, or actually landed jobs, or may have felt just more confident in taking those first steps. So we're delighted to showcase some of our mentees who've had wonderful success stories on the platform. We also run various skills webinars in partnership with universities, so we're reaching other students and graduates by working closely with universities like University of Bedfordshire, University of Middlesex, to name but a few. And also we have some wonderful partners who are providing some financial support so we can cover our costs and also maintain Graduate Mentor for future generations. So a huge thanks to our partners, Graduate Recruitment Bureau, SureServe Group, Softwire and Oakwood. Right, over to our speaker, Sally Walker. Sally came highly recommended from one of our mentors, and she is a career and leadership coach with extensive international experience gained in her early career as an HR leader. working for huge companies like ExxonMobil and General Electric. She has been an expatriate working in Paris and an expat spouse on assignment in Belgium, and has run HR teams across all parts of the world. Successfully coached and delivered intercultural training to hundreds of clients, including graduates, on a global basis for the last 20 years. So it is absolutely brilliant to have Sally for the next 40 minutes or so to present to you guys. There will be the opportunity at the end, as always, for any questions. So just use the chat facility and we'll try and get those at the end. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my slides and hand over to Sally. Sally, over to you.
Thank you very much. Just going to find my slides now. Thank you, Dan. Hi, everybody. Great to be invited. Hope you can all see slides on screen. I'm going to be talking today, yes, absolutely, about building a global mindset through developing this competence, intercultural competence, that you may hear it described as. You might also hear it as cultural intelligence, CQ. So it's got lots of different sort of descriptors to it, but in essence, it's helping you to thrive in multicultural workplaces, whether that's in the UK, whether that's working abroad. You will see that this competence has relevance in all areas of our working lives. I don't think I need to cover any of this. Dan, I'm sorry, background noise there, and everybody can hear that. Dan's kindly introduced me, so again, nothing further needed there. Aside to say that I have last year written an ebook on intercultural competence, so on this topic, which is available via Bookboon if anybody's interested. And finally, just in terms of me, who am I? I'm also I'm not only a coach, I'm a mum, I'm a hiker, a traveller, and at the end of last year, I was over in Norway wild camping and kayaking, just to give you a flavour of what I like to do. So we are going to I'm going to move through some slides. I've got a little sort of icebreaker exercise for you in just a second, and then I will make sure that I have paused at the end and given you a chance round about 1:50, 1:55 to ask any questions before we finish at 2 o'clock. So I hope that suits everybody. What are we talking about when we are talking about intercultural competence? What do we mean? Really, it's the combination of the knowledge, skills and attitudes that you need to get on effectively with somebody, with a person or a team who has a different cultural background to you. And so this begs the question, well, what do we mean by culture? What do we mean by cultural background? So this is your chance to kind of get involved. I would be really grateful if you could use chat. I'm not sure, Dan may need to help me because I can't see the output of chat from where I'm looking. But in chat, I'd really like you just to write down which number of the photos that you can see in front of you, which number best describes culture to you. There may be one number you're writing, there might be a few that you think, oh, it's those, or you might even think, well, it's all of them. It's, again, just curious to know what your thoughts are. Let's give you just a few seconds just to pop those into chat. Dan, I can't easily see chat. I don't know if you could possibly tell me what you're seeing in terms of responses
Yes,
around the room,
yeah,
please.
we've
Thank
had a lot of people say all.
Mm-hmm.
One person said 5, 6 and 3.
Yep. Lovely.
Another all.
Super. Well, I will go with that then. Well,
yeah, okay.
Thank you. Really helpful. Thank you. Those of you who wrote all, yes, you are absolutely on the mark. So those who were just perhaps picking up on a few of these, maybe the third picture, which was sort of reflecting the kind of professional life, 5 being our educational backgrounds, and 6 being perhaps where we've got age in common, as a sort of cultural identifier between us. You were right, but there were just other pictures as well. So all 6 of these photos actually describes a cultural group that you may be part of, that may be part of your kind of cultural kind of identity. Whether that's, number one is some sort of social grouping, whether it's a sports group that you're part of or you have been part of in the past. Your nationality is what the photo at number 2 was representing, has a cultural effect. One nationality, one country, culture will vary from one to another. Professional working life is 3. Fourth, our religion can have a huge effect on our cultural upbringing, education, and, as I've said, age. So what we're looking at here is the fact that culture is actually much more complex than just saying, oh, somebody's American or somebody's British. There are lots of other factors that influence our backgrounds. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But if we think about it, then having a global mindset or intercultural competence is about how well you can get on with people who've got very different cultural backgrounds and maybe from the same country, may have the same nationality. They may be British, but they might have a very different, maybe a different religion. They may have had a different educational upbringing to you, etc. So it's how do you communicate effectively there? Now, I've said that, today having a global mindset is going to be able to help you really thrive in multicultural kind of workplaces. So the question is, what is a multicultural workplace? And really, the questions here are designed obviously to help you reflect on that. It's going to be somewhere where it's not feeling sort of homogenous, where you don't all have the exact same background. So you'll find when you start working, as you probably are finding at present, that not everybody has been to university. So not everybody is a graduate that you'll be working with. Immediately, that brings in some cultural difference. Somebody hasn't had that same cultural background and point of reference as you. So it could be that everybody, as I say, is of the same nationality, but they have differing educational backgrounds. If you join a team, do you feel a bit like an outsider, a fish out of water, we would say in English? If so, it could be then that the team that you've joined has some different cultural influences going on there that are not ones that you are familiar with. Are there different cultural events being recognised within the group or the company and being celebrated? Are there particularly sort of ways of working, norms of working, which seem different from your previous experience? All of these different sort of aspects would perhaps lead you to think, yeah, this is a multicultural environment that I'm in. So what I want to emphasize here is, as I say, this is not, you can be in a multicultural environment and all of your colleagues can speak exactly the same language and come from the same country, but will have potentially very different cultural experiences historically. So what's the benefit of working in a team like this, as opposed to a very much more, as I say, homogenous team where everybody's got very, very similar backgrounds? Well, research has demonstrated, actually, research being done that's proven that there are lots of benefits for you as individuals, but also benefits for the companies where we've got the multicultural teams. Tends to be quite a stimulating environment. You've got lots of different perspectives, different experiences, different ages, perhaps, different genders, as I say, different educational experiences, maybe different social, experiences that are coming to bear. So stimulation is high on the list for you as a graduate. Probably going to attract high potential talents, particularly, obviously, if this is a multicultural team with an international dimension to it, where you have, even if you are based in your home country, you've perhaps got colleagues who are from different parts of the world in the team as well. Or there may be the possibility, the opportunity for you to go and work abroad, as I did as a graduate. After a couple of years of joining ESSO UK, I went over and became an expatriate in ESSO France for a couple of years as a young graduate, and it was really a very rich kind of time from a learning point of view. From the company's point of view, lots of innovation, new ideas, new perspectives coming, and often that leads to lots of growth for the company, but learning for you as well. So I would be really encouraging you to try to find experience like this during your careers. As I say, it can be challenging, and there are challenges facing multicultural teams. Particularly, it's much easier to communicate with colleagues who have very similar backgrounds. If you're just working in a graduate team, everybody's been to university, maybe you're all from the same country, you're all you're all the same gender, maybe this is a female group, so again, that would be very homogenous, and you would probably have huge amounts in common, and communication might be relatively easy, but yet you would potentially be missing out on some of those benefits that I've just described. So we need to be aware of some of the challenges that you might already have faced. When we talk about questions at the end, you might be mentioning that you've experienced some of these challenges, but let's just walk through them so that you're ready for them, so that you're aware of what might be ahead of you when you're in this sort of situation of a multicultural group. Language is probably the most obvious one. Now, obviously, that's particularly true if you've got colleagues who are speaking different languages, perhaps coming from different parts of the world. We're not necessarily all based in the same location, maybe, again, having to speak to each other virtually via Teams or Zoom platforms and so on. Language can then have become an issue of kind of status and power. There's likely to be one language that dominates. And if you are a home country speaker, if that's your native tongue, your mother tongue, it's potentially going to be much easier for you to make a point than somebody who's perhaps speaking in second or third language. So again, being aware of that and the kind of power issue is important. Even where you're working with colleagues in a multicultural team who are from the same country and all speak the same language, you might find there are really strong accents amongst colleagues, which make it hard for you to understand each other. And it feels a bit embarrassing to ask somebody to repeat themselves. But if you could, as we will see later, maybe agree on some ground rules that it's okay, it's acceptable to ask for people to repeat things, then that overcomes that issue. But language is key. Non-verbal communication, non-verbal language is also potentially a challenge in a team. Remembering that, around the world and, with different cultural backgrounds, hand gestures, nodding, shaking of head, eye contact have very different meanings depending on your cultural background. So I would encourage you, as part of gaining global mindset or intercultural competence, is not to make any assumptions that just because somebody's nodding their head that it means the same as your kind of cultural reference point. You might need to ask some questions, checking in to make sure that you have got the right assumption there. You may find that colleagues have different communication styles depending on their cultural backgrounds. Some people will naturally have very direct styles and be very clear. They may say, well, this needs to be redone. Whereas somebody who has a more indirect style will perhaps be more subtle. They may be more implicit in what they're saying, and instead may say something like, there are just one or two minor changes to be made here, but actually really what they mean is actually it needs to be redone, but they're trying to help you or the individual they're speaking to save face, and not wanting to appear too direct or too rude. So again, be aware of some of those differences. Everybody's coming at this from their own cultural background perspective. Some people you work with will prefer hierarchy, and others will prefer to be more egalitarian, have more of that flat structure because of their cultural backgrounds. This is particularly true related to nationalities. So certain country locations, not all, but some Asian countries will be probably have preference towards hierarchy, where other countries may prefer more flatter structure. So again, just being careful not to make any assumptions about your colleagues. Some colleagues, on a time preference point of view, you'll have colleagues who will be much more will see time as a linear thing, that we do one thing after another and it's very structured and arrive on time for meetings. And you'll have other colleagues who will have a more fluid view of time. And they'll probably want to do things, they'll jump around, say, well, we'll do this first. Oh, no, we'll do that next, and do things in parallel. They may not always arrive on time for a meeting because they will be picking up on spontaneous issues, much more operational kind of view of time, and what's particularly important to a customer or a stakeholder will be what comes first for them, rather than logically what we'd set out to do. So again, neither is right nor wrong. These are just differences, and it's tempting if you're not aware that, you know, there is the possibility of doing things in the other way, that you might, oh, well, you know, why do they always turn up late? But that's to do with their cultural background. And then finally, you might find that you're working with colleagues who have different decision-making preferences to you. Some may prefer to have all of the information, 110% of the information, before they're prepared to make a decision. They may want to do that as a team in a consensual kind of way, or you may find you or colleagues that you work with prefer, they don't need to have that much information and go with kind of 80% of the information, and again may prefer to be autonomous and you know, have the sort of individual hold on that decision, rather than having to draw in lots of colleagues and take time to reflect together. So the key takeaway from this particular slide, I think, is there is no right or wrong. We just need to be really aware of how other people might be approaching these situations. And I would really encourage you, as you know, you're looking at these points, to think, well, what's my preference? You know, where am I starting from? What's my style? You know, how do I handle time? Am I somebody who's very timely, or is my background one that's, you know, makes me more kind of fluid about time? Because this is where gaining a global mindset really begins. It's about knowing yourself really well before you start to try to sort of view colleagues and others around you. Knowing yourself better tends to prevent you from making too many quick judgments about others. So this is a little exercise that you might want to do. You could be doing it right now whilst I'm talking on a pad or tablet, or you might want to perhaps do something like this after the session is over later today or whenever. It's about helping you think about your cultural identity, and it's a way of helping you to find common ground with colleagues in a multicultural setting, where at first sight you might think, oh gosh, I haven't got anything in common with them. You know, that person hasn't been to university. You know, I don't know what are we going to talk about? How are we going to be able to get on together? This exercise might enable you to, as I say, find more things in common together. So I would encourage you to think, first of all, about what are the different ways that you identify yourself. So one of them might be, I'm a graduate of Durham University. So yes, so that's one way of identifying myself, but I'm not just a graduate. And you know, here on screen, I've from a research document just pulled another example of this little culture flower, as it's called, where on each petal we put our different identities. So, you know, again, I'm female. I would identify as being a human resources leader, as being somebody who's a French speaker, a dog owner, a cinema lover. So, you know, those are my various. I'm a mum, I'm a daughter. We have very many, multiple identities, not just one identity. So try to create your own culture flower like this, which hopefully help you recognize your own complexity for a start, and also that of other people. And it'll make conversations easier for finding common ground. So just as an example of this, just before Christmas, I was going to be working with a new client who was Mexican gentleman, works for the Mexican government, coming over to work here in the UK. And I was going to be supporting him in integrating here. And I sort of thought, well, what do I know about Mexico? I don't really know very much beyond, you know, sombreros, food, etc. So I met with Luis, and before we went any further, I said, look, I suggest that we both complete this sort of little culture flower exercise. So we had a blank flower, and he filled in 6 different identities, you know, as on the example on the screen. I did the same, and then we had a look and we chatted together. And we immediately found lots of common ground that we hadn't expected. we were both only children. We were both cinema lovers, and we talking about films and things. We've both been to university. So, the fact that he was Mexican, I was British, and that was, yes, it was a difference. Actually, we ended up having more similarities than very many Brits that I know. And that then really helped us move forward in working together on his job search strategy and so on. So bearing in mind that, if you're ever leading a group and you need a little icebreaker exercise, this could be a useful one for you. So in terms of talking about global mindset or gaining intercultural competence, which again, I just want to point out is something that's going to take you a lifetime. This is not something you can just come on a 1 hour webinar today and kind of have got it. Hopefully it'll give you some of the flavors of what we mean by it, but you're going to have to consciously, as you go through your working lives and your personal lives, be aware of building more and more of this competence, this global mindset, as you move forward. So the question is kind of, where are you now at the moment? You may have a really significant level of intercultural competence without even realizing it, because you've just been subconsciously, unconsciously kind of operating in the right ways without realizing it. That's very often what I find with people. So you might want to ask yourself some of these questions to find out what's my level of global mindset. Do you make quick assumptions about colleagues, or do you prejudge situations? If you don't, if you can point to examples where you've held back on making an assumption, you've maybe asked some more questions, checked something out before coming to a conclusion, that would demonstrate that you've got a level of intercultural competence. How do you kind of measure a new colleague's behavior or a fellow student? If you think about your university days, did you make a sort of judgment on them based on your own identity, your own experience? Or did you try to put yourself in their shoes and think, well, they've got, different cultural influences on them. I know they've got a different religious background to me. They've got to come from a different country. They're male, maybe they're all going to have, those are going to be different factors that might influence the person's behavior. What examples can you point to where you've shown really good observation, listening, evaluating, interpreting, and relationship building skills? Where have you shown active listening, where you've not jumped in and interrupted somebody? You've paused, let them speak. You've maybe paraphrased back to them what they've said. Again, that's showing really good intercultural competence. Where have you built relationships based on empathy, imagining what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes? Where have you been interested in other people, shown curiosity? And then finally, how comfortable are you with a whole range of both verbal behaviors, so different languages, but also non-verbal behaviors? Where have you put yourself in some situations of difference? What do you notice when you travel, when you go on holiday? Where do you gravitate towards, and so on? So it might be helpful to seek feedback from other people if you're not sure. I'm sure whether I demonstrate some of these aspects of competence or not, intercultural competence. You might, if you've got colleagues around you, whether that's other graduates or mentors or managers, you might ask them, what evidence do you see in me of having some of these attributes? Because these are what we're aiming towards. So I'd like to specifically kind of share with you today 3 particular aspects of intercultural competence, which if you gain these 3, in my experience, you are going to be significantly better able to work really effectively and thrive in multicultural environments, whether that's as part of a team or whether that's working, indirectly with colleagues here in the UK or elsewhere around the world. And the 3 that I've selected are from my own experience of doing the master's course, from research, but also practically, as I said earlier, from working around the world. These are the 3 things that I really try to do consciously that I think really do help to build more effective relationships. So the first one is around increasing your tolerance of uncertainty. So let's take that one. So I'm going to give you just a few ideas for each of these 3 areas of things that you could do that I hope would help, improve or develop this aspect of intercultural competence. You might want to be writing down if there's one in particular you think, yeah, I'm definitely going to take action on that front. That would be good. Don't try to think, oh gosh, I can't do all of these things at the same time. Select one that's going to be really actionable for you, and then really consciously work on that one. And then you could, at future, maybe listen again to this session and think, right, now I'm going to do that second area, and I'll really work on that one. So again, don't overload yourself, but set yourself some reasonable targets for development of this competence. So in terms of your tolerance of uncertainty, it's really, really common and normal that we don't like uncertain situations at work in particular. We don't like situations of newness or where there's going to be lots of change. Very often, not always, but very often we don't like that because it makes us feel a bit insecure. How am I going to fit in, or what's this change going to mean for me? And I say can feel sometimes quite stressful. We want to get out of those situations quite quickly, and therefore it's tempting sometimes when you're at work to think that you need to make quick decisions so that things can get sorted. We need to decide how we're going to move forward on this marketing presentation, or we're going to decide, how much data we need to gather so that we can do this analysis for the finance team or whatever. But actually, if you just kind of slow things down a little bit when you're working in a multicultural setting and don't jump to have to make decisions quickly, then actually you're going to get a richer response from people. And it really is going to improve your relationships with others. So on that first point, suspend, assumptions and judgments about others. So when it's, you're being introduced to new colleagues in, team meeting or whatever, again, don't just make labels, don't jump to some assumptions about how you think that they're going to fit into the team or what the effect is going to be of them being part of your team. Wait until you've had a chance to get to know them, ask some questions of them, as you'll see on the second point. If you are getting involved in making decisions and you hear the rest of the group rushing to kind of, right, okay, well, I think we should do this. If there's been somebody quieter in the multicultural team, you might want to pause and say, well, what's your view on this? What are your thoughts? And it may be, again, the person's working a second or a third language, so it's really helpful to draw them in. So asking questions, listening and asking more questions is really helpful. You might ask the team, where have we seen a similar situation like this before? Do we know anything about what the competition are doing in this particular area, depending on what you're working on? If you're, not sure why somebody is asking you a question, you might ask them, can you share with me, what's behind your request? Just need to understand what it is you're looking for. So again, drill down beyond just the surface question. And then thirdly, again, rather than, if you're being introduced to colleagues who've got different cultural backgrounds to you on all sorts of dimensions, I say gender, religion, politics, nationality, etc., rather than trying to keep away from each other, get out of your comfort zone and try to come closer. Spend more time with that colleague. Even if it's a virtual coffee conversation with somebody who's based in America, finding, 10, 15 minutes ahead of a meeting to say, look, let's come on to the Teams call together and, just get to know each other a little better, ask each other questions. So making time to get to know people, building that kind of familiarity, having a coffee together, having a lunch together, if those things are possible. Obviously, with today's remote and hybrid working, it's making things a little bit more challenging to get to know colleagues. And I would really encourage you to be as proactive as you can in doing this. If there's a day when everybody is going to be in the office, set up some little coffee meetings with people to get to know them as a person, not just what they're doing professionally around you. Okay. Generally, in my experience, as long as you are asking people questions, getting to know them in a sensitive way, then most people really like to be asked. They like other people to have interest in them. So I think that's really important to bear that in mind. Second area that I would encourage you to really be conscious of as you are building your sense of intercultural competence is to build, relationships based on empathy, based on imagining you're putting yourself into the shoes of somebody else and what it might look and feel like for them, given what you maybe know a little bit about their backgrounds, how they might see a situation differently to the way that you see it, and that it's not wrong that they are seeing things differently to you. It's just different, and that you've got to learn to communicate together across those differences. So first off, how do we do that? Well, it is very much about trying to find common ground rather than difference. Now that might sound obvious, but if you are, together on you put together on an audit team, let's say. A lot of the graduates I work with are going into finance. They're put on an audit team and, thrown straight into a task straight away. And we've got to get this work through because, again, this is money making time. The clock is ticking, and it's tempting just to focus on the task, getting the particular piece of work done. If you can make a little bit of time, even if it's outside of work, go and have a coffee together, as I've said. But if you can, almost do that culture flower exercise, draw out some of the, what do you do outside of work? What do you like doing? Educationally, what's your background? Where do you like to, do you go away on holiday? Where's of interest? Can I ask you about your family? Again, very often it's nice to be sensitive and ask the question, is it okay if I ask you about? Because some people won't necessarily want to share information about their backgrounds, but very many people will. But it needs to be made time for. So again, relationship first will speed up the task in hand. If you know the person, get to know them better, know how they work, what their preferences are, then it will make the work more effective. Secondly, how often do you ask other people for help? I hope you do. I hope you've gained that from your university courses. But in work, again, it's important not to just grit your teeth. That's not what resilience is. Actually, it's about, when you need help, then asking others, demonstrating humility and vulnerability. And that also builds a good, strong relationship with a colleague. Maybe somebody who's joined the organization or the company a few years prior to you. And again, you're seeking them out. Look, really appreciate your help just to understand how this works, or what's the best way to kind of liaise with so-and-so, what's worked for you. So again, reaching out for others. Don't think you've got to, just because you're a graduate, that you've got to be able to solve everything on your own. And then thirdly, on this particular point about how to build really good relationships, is to make sure that you are praising other people who've helped you. So if it's been, your particular task, but 2 or 3 colleagues have really contributed to it, giving you some insights, or gone above the extra, gone the extra mile to sit with you and maybe show you a particular system or process for doing something. Make sure that you are mentioning them. If you're sharing the outcome to your manager, or you're making a presentation, or discussing it with stakeholders, make sure that you obviously mention other people who've helped you. You could send them a little email, thanking them for it. Make some of these deliberate, be really conscious of doing this. Obviously in a genuine kind of way, but it is important. People, the one thing I hear time and time again when I'm working with career coaching clients, they are looking for appreciation from colleagues and from their manager. And that it can just be the little thanks that makes the day. So if you could be the person who really does this, again, it will really stand you in good stead for thriving at work. Thirdly, I would really encourage you to get interested in other cultures. And I hope, already from what I've been saying just in the last half an hour, you're getting the understanding that, other cultures are not just obviously other nationality cultures. It is important to be interested in where somebody comes from geographically. But as I say, there are other aspects of culture and cultural background. Be interested in somebody's background. If they've not been to university, what's been their experience? Maybe they've done an apprenticeship. Maybe they've, worked straight from school. Be interested in their cultural background if they want to share it in terms of their religion, and what the highlights, what are the celebrations, what's important to them. Thinking, again, about sports, social. We saw the photograph earlier of the ice hockey team. Again, showing curiosity in things that other people are interested in your teams, even if it's not something that you know much about. I don't know a lot about rugby, but I've got a couple of colleagues who are really into rugby. So I am really consciously trying to, show an interest, understand what's going on, how it's different from football, which I know more about. So again, it's on all sorts of levels, this cultural curiosity. But it's demonstrating you're prepared to deepen your engagement, as it says here on screen, with other cultures. You're not just kind of an island. You're not just closed off to other possibilities. Be curious. Certainly, if you've got colleagues in your team who speak other languages, you might want to be learning, either a few words or even going further and really improving the level of language ability that you have. You can do it in a fun way. I'm learning Japanese at the moment via Duolingo for a trip at the end of March. It's an easy, fun way. I'm watching Japanese films. Got some books out of the library which are translated into English, but kind of are stories with a Japanese setting. So it's for a trip, and I'm going to be able to meet Japanese colleagues there and at least be able to say a few words, which again it's a way of showing your humility, your vulnerability, which are very important aspects at work for you, that you're not above, just because you may speak, a particular language, whether it's English, Chinese or whatever, but that you are prepared to make attempts to learn other languages and I say have that level of vulnerability. And then thirdly, you might want to keep some kind of a diary, some kind of a journal where you're noting down cultural experiences or incidents that you have that are unexpected or surprising. Maybe a colleague says to you something that's much more direct than you are used to from your cultural background. Typically, again, we can only talk typically here in the UK, we tend to speak and work quite indirectly. We don't tell somebody straight on if we're not happy about something. We would try to sort of do it subtly. Again, can't say all Brits do that, but as a general trend, that would be the case. So if you had met a colleague who was much more direct, you might be noting that down in your journal. You might use in that journal the kind of idea of the 3 R's to be reporting it, writing it in your journal, and then reflecting. Well, I don't suppose they were being direct because they were just deliberately wanting to be rude. I'm interpreting it as rudeness. I'm feeling it felt critical, but actually, how could I see that differently? Perhaps they come from a culture where it's very normal to be direct, clear, because then the person knows exactly, where they stand, what needs to be sorted out. And certainly country culture-wise, you could think of the Netherlands, for instance, having that much more direct culture in terms of communication style. It's very normal there. And then thirdly, in your journal, you could be thinking about, well, how am I going to reevaluate this situation? How am I to handle this differently then going forward if I come across another colleague who's very direct with me, rather than taking offense or feeling upset because they've been very direct with me? Maybe I can next time learn to be more accepting of that and recognize that that's part of their way of communicating. Maybe I can share with them that for my cultural upbringing, it feels like it's a criticism, but that I'm learning that it isn't necessarily. So again, you're trying to explain, make culture explicit, let somebody else know if their culture has rubbed up against yours, but you're doing it in a gentle, sensitive kind of way. You're not getting angry with them or say being very upset emotionally in the office. Again, you're trying to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and think, imagine why did they act like that? What might be some of the reasons for that? You might find it helpful. I've talked here on screen about, debriefing some of these unexpected situations with an intercultural mentor. So this would be somebody, obviously, who it's not necessarily your manager, but it's somebody who is familiar with the sort of cultural background of the person that you've maybe had this kind of unexpected experience with. So it's maybe somebody who's very familiar with a particular religious background, who's particularly familiar with a particular country or nationality kind of background, or somebody who's, again, you might be asking, well, is this something that's to do with age? You're much younger than I am. It could be that, again, there's a difference, that something that I'm assuming and taking for granted because I'm at, 2 or 3 decades older than you are, is not obvious to you. So again, you would want to find a mentor from that age group to say, oh, am I reading this right? How should I be seeing this differently? And at the bottom of the screen, I've just given, 2 or 3 little examples of the sorts of unexpected intercultural incidents or episodes that you might be noting down and then reflecting on and learning from, so that you handle those perhaps differently going forward. And then as we head up towards, what's going to be one of our last slides here, and then I'll give you a little bit of time for questions before we finish at 2. I just wanted to just give you a little easy framework to remember. As graduates, you are very likely, if not now, possibly in the very near future, to be leading multicultural teams. So people who've got different cultural backgrounds coming together. And, I want you to do that as effectively as possible. And using the split, S for structure, P for process, L for language, I for identity, and T for technology. If you remember all those 5 aspects, and I'll explain what they mean, that when you're setting up your teams or when you're joining a team and leading them, it's very likely then you will be successful as that team leader or as a team as a whole. So first off, think about structure. What structures have you got in your team? Are you going to have a kick-off meeting together if you're coming together at the start? How are you going to get to know each other initially as part of that structure? Are there any icebreaker exercises like the culture flower one that I shared with you earlier? How are you going to build relationships? Could you take an extra long lunch hour as a team to get to know each other and talk about hobbies and holidays, that sort of thing? Secondly, when you're in a team or leading a team, think about the processes that you've got for communication. Have you got regular, one-to-one meeting dates set up? What about team gatherings together? You'll need more communication rather than less, particularly if people are spread around the world and you're liaising virtually together. You may need to repeat expectations. So expectation setting is part of those processes that you are setting up. Be really clear about expectations because they can kind of get lost in translation sometimes, particularly if you're not all sitting physically in the same office together. How are you going to be measured and so on? L for language. When you're part of or leading a multicultural team, why not have some ground rules, some language ground rules? You could agree that it's okay to ask colleagues to repeat themselves, particularly if they've got a strong, you or they have got strong accents, or obviously there are multiple languages. If there are lots of languages around the team, try to incorporate some of the aspects of the language in a meeting. You could, how are we all going to kind of learn a few of these words, incorporate them in a presentation. Again, try to bring the language issue to life. Increase the number of pictures you use when you're making presentations to multicultural teams and graphs. So reducing complicated words, jargon, unnecessary acronyms. So be really conscious of your use of language yourself, particularly, as I say, where you've got people who are speaking in a second or a third language. Make sure in a team meeting that you give people plenty of time to reflect on a decision, or if you want input from them during a meeting, let them know that ahead of time, because that will give people, particularly who aren't speaking all the same language, it will give them time to think about what they want to say and to contribute. In terms of identity, this is about celebrating and positively, sort of being aware of the diversity in the team and celebrating that, whether it's cultural events going on. I mean, today is Burns Night, so we'd want all the Scots people in the team to be celebrating, talking about what Burns Night means to them, and so on. So yeah, definitely incorporating some of that and getting that richness into your team meetings. And then lastly, making sure that in terms of the technology, you are using technology to make people as welcome as possible in your team, to make the team as collaborative and as equal as it's possible. So thinking about dates of meetings, making sure that, again, you're maybe sharing beginning and end days of meeting times. You don't always just choose one time that suits you, your time zone. There may need to be variety of timings chosen. Think about when you send out emails, the volume of emails that you send out. That can vary significantly from one culture to another. So either from a company culture point of view, there can be different norms of what's acceptable with emails, but also country-wise, some very different expectations. Certain countries, we don't work, late into the evening. Other countries will do that, and they will think it's okay to send emails back and forth. So again, get some sort of technology ground rules would be my suggestion to you. What's agreeable? What's the kind of common ground for everybody? That's ideally what we're seeking. So then drawing things together, really, I'm really hoping that today has given you a high level understanding of what having a global mindset or this sense of intercultural competence, what that means and how it will really be of benefit to you in your careers going forward, irrespective of whether you stay in one country or whether you move geographically around the world. It'll hopefully help you to really collaborate better with colleagues and be more tolerant, be more empathetic. And for you and the organisation that you're working for, there'll be more innovation and more growth and more personal development for you as an individual. Just hopping here, I would love, to connect with you, particularly on LinkedIn, to stay in touch together. If there are, any connections that I've got from my 4,000 odd contacts globally that would be helpful, I'm always happy to try to put you in touch with others. I've included there my website, SW Career Coaching, and then the Intercultural Competence ebook by Book Boon. So those are all the ways that hopefully you can stay in touch and get in touch with me. So going back to questions now. Sorry, Dan, go ahead.
Sally, that's great. On behalf of everyone who's tuned in today and everyone who's going to be listening back to this webinar, thank you very much for supporting Graduate Mentor and sharing your presentation today, and offering to connect with other students and graduates is going to give them a great help too. So thank you very much indeed.
No problem.
We do have 5 minutes for questions. So while people are having a think, if there is something you didn't cover, it was very comprehensive, I have to say. One thing I wanted to mention was a lot of students who go through university for 3 or 4 years will have been in an environment with people from different backgrounds. So hopefully that will prepare and help them be more aware of cultural differences. So, yes, subconsciously or not. But I like the fact that you are taking that into the workplace and continuing to learn by keeping a journal. I thought that was a useful tip. It's not just something you try and give up. You maintain that open-mindedness and try and understand your colleagues.
Exactly, Dan. No, you're right. I think it is that point about just pausing very often. We're so busy, many of the environments that graduates around the room today are going to be working in very fast paced, and we're focused on task and getting results. But I think the idea of I just need to pause a little bit, not react, but respond is again something I'd like to sort of suggest is a good activity for life, really, but particularly at
Yeah.
work. Let's not be reactive to others. Let's respond after a bit of
Yeah.
thought. It is helpful.
That's hard to rein in when you want to be keen and you want
Yeah,
to
yeah.
get on in an
Mm.
organization. So yeah, my question would be, how can you understand what an organization's culture is like before you set foot? I
Love
mean, you'll
it.
get all the information on their website, and
Yep.
maybe they'll have webinars, or you have the
Hmm.
opportunity to speak to some graduates who are already working there,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
some organization may be very closed off.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, what cues can you get from a website, or what questions could you ask
Hmm.
to try and
Hmm.
just see what you're potentially going into?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Dan. Thank you. And it is difficult. Most websites, most mission statements from large organisations, particularly, do tend to sound pretty similar. They're all going to support their employees. They're all going to give great customer service. So how do we
Yeah,
differentiate which one's really going to meet your needs as an individual? First of all, I think you need to know what your needs are, folks. You need to think, what do I want from this future organisation? Do I need an environment that is supportive, kind, empathetic, or do I prefer, is that not so important to me? And I'm quite happy in a more, driven, tough, fast-paced, competitive environments. So think about, be honest with yourself to begin with, would be the first thing. I remember being turned down for a job at one of the UK's, it was a big chemical company, and the
yeah,
feedback being, we didn't think you were going to be tough enough. And I
right,
really thought that was a bad thing, but actually afterwards thought, well, I don't want a tough environment. So, that
yeah,
wouldn't have been right anyway. Once you know what you want, then I think it's about using LinkedIn in particular, but using your networks to try to find somebody, or more than one person ideally, but one to begin with, who works in the organization. It often is your second connection. So a colleague of a colleague, a connection of
right,
a connection, as you were suggesting, really, Dan, and asking them then. So if being, supported is important, you might say to the person, do you feel supported in this organization? What behaviors do you see that kind of that give you that feeling? And then you're probing specifically on the things that are important to you. And then I would always ask at the end of that conversation, is there anybody else you can suggest that I could speak to? And it's like a
yeah,
spider's web. You maybe get 2 or 3 people to get a cross section of views
yeah,
about the culture, because it will vary, won't it, from department to department, team to team. It's very
yeah.
driven by the manager, the leader of that particular person that you're going to be working for. Makes a huge difference.
Absolutely, and we had another workshop on how to use LinkedIn to get a job, and one of
Hmm.
the ways to try and get a response from a line manager or recruiter is to ask them a question rather than going in straight away saying, "Do you have a job? Are you
Yeah,
looking? Can you hire
yeah,
me?" That kind of thing.
yeah.
Take a pause and actually ask a question about the company, and you
Good.
9 times out of 10 you'll get a good response. So
Yeah,
you could use that.
yeah.
You could frame it by you're trying to find out a bit more about the culture and what it's like to work there.
Hmm. Hmm.
And when you send an email, you might get a good response.
Yeah,
Brilliant. Good.
yeah.
All right.
Lovely.
Well,
Thank you.
we're out of
Good.
time,
Yep.
and we do thank you for your time and sharing your insights today. It's going to be
Pleasure.
extremely useful to all these students and graduates who find it a very scary step going into the workplace for the first time. And it's this preparation and mindset that will hopefully help them get along.
Good.
So
No,
we
that's
do
great. Wishing
appreciate
everybody all
it.
the very best around the room. Love to hear from you on LinkedIn. And yeah, very happy to stay in touch that way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sally.
Thanks so much. Take good care,
All
everybody.
right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye bye. Bye bye.